Welcome, everybody. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you. We are streaming tonight, and it will be recorded, so you know. Aaron has the video going. I know of at least, I believe, one. There are some viewers, perhaps, out in Washington. Hi, and perhaps others. And so anyway, welcome, everybody, to the presentation tonight. Big, huge thank you once again to this congregation for this time and for what I've been up to. So I wanted to let you know where I have been and how I have used this time. A long time ago, a man who leads trips into wilderness areas and things says there are three phases to any trip. There's the pre-trip, the planning, the anticipation, the preparation, and then there's the trip, and then there's the post-trip, which is all of the storytelling and the remembering and the kind of the putting together of all the parts. And all of those pieces make up the whole of the trip. So here we are. For me, I think most of you know, this my trip started really at the beginning of Lent. Last year, shortly after I had announced sabbatical here at this church. I have been at this congregation for 6 years, you know, through 2 years of pandemic, and at that time I was feeling quite exhausted and needed a recharge. And so the congregation graciously granted that. And then I began thinking about what to do with that time. So why the Camino? Well, it's been on my radar for some time. I needed a focus for the sabbatical. We were looking for a little European travel with Mary, and I have been hiking more in recent years, though not perhaps religiously. Walking has proven benefits for mental health. And long ago, I styled myself as a kind of a backpacker. So this was sort of a return to the roots. Also, my father, at about this age, began walking more long distances as well. There was a time when he hiked 100 miles from his house down to where we lived in Minnesota at that time one spring. And he and Mom hiked a lot in Europe and around North America in their retirement. So this could be a sort of an action memorial for me too, for Dad. So the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James, is a large network of some ancient pilgrimage routes. It stretches across Europe. It comes together in Santiago de Compostela, which is this corner right up here in Galicia in northwest Spain. The high point for numbers of pilgrims on all of these routes so far was 2019, when something like 350,000 people ended up in Santiago. A year later, in 2020, COVID, that number dropped to 54,000. Last year, the number was up to 179,000, so about halfway back to the 2019 goal. And from what I have been reading so far this year, this year's travelers are on a course to make that 2019 mark as well. So it's resurging. The history of the Camino reaches back to the 9th century, actually to the year 814, when the remains of what is believed to be James, the apostle of Jesus, were found to be buried at the cathedral at Santiago. So when the Pope declared that these were the remains of James, instantly that spot became a target for pilgrims all across Europe. And so they began flooding into Spain, and the routes, which traveled even older Roman paths, quickly developed. Hospitals, monasteries, churches, all kinds of things. Infrastructure developed in the early years of the Camino. It began to decay in the 14th century due to wars and other pandemics of the time. And it dwindled then until really about the late 1900s, when some work began to rejuvenate the routes. nowadays, and in fact, the explosion, the real rejuvenation of the routes happened in the last quarter of the last century, of the 20th century. So in that time, the routes have once again seen a resurgence. Nowadays, motivations may have changed from when they were in 814. There's more exercise involved now and a more broad-based spirituality, but the underpinnings of the Camino remain spiritual. And at the end, when they give you the Compostela, it tells you that you have undertaken this route in a spirit of piety. So the routes you can see are kind of like river systems or a watershed. The most popular is the Francais, and that's this kind of purplish route here that goes from the border with France all the way over. The entire route there is about 616 kilometers. 780 kilometers, about 500 miles. And people will take a month or more to hike the Francais. The second most popular route is the Portuguese route, starting in Lisbon and going up here. This, if you go all the way from Lisbon, is about 380 miles. Most people who do the Portuguese route do what I did, which is start right here in Porto and hike north. This is, it's more populated, it's more well-supported, and it is about 170 miles, 270 kilometers in its distance. It took me 14 days to do that. It's considered a medium distance on the Camino. So to get here, just really briefly, Mary and I flew into Lisbon. We spent a couple days there. We went up on the train into about the middle of the country, visited a town there called Coimbra, which is kind of the Oxford of Portugal, and then on to Porto, spent a couple days there. And then on Sunday the 16th, Mary flew out for home, and I started walking. So the first 2 days took me from Porto up to Vila Chá, and then from Vila Chá to Agucadora. And two things were established in those first 2 days that came to define the Camino for me. And the first thing is community. And just about everybody says this all the time about the community, about the Camino. This is leaving Porto. As I started out, other people are filtering in, coming in, and everybody is, oh, bom Camino, bo Camino, buen Camino. It really didn't matter, you just, Camino. And people took that as a sign of goodwill, and, they're all filtering in. There were two men from Spain that came down, and I walked with them for a little while along the promenade. Neither of us could really understand each other very well. I have just a rudimentary Spanish, and they had no English. But I came to learn they were from Grenada, and we walked together for a little bit further. And then I stopped for coffee, and as I continued up the coast, this woman walked up behind me, and we fell into a conversation. This is Lenore. Lenore is from Colorado. She was walking faster than I was walking. And so while we were talking, I had to step up my pace. And I'm thinking, this is good. This is pushing me a little bit. I'm kind of enjoying the physical activity and also enjoying the conversation. We got to talk about, a little bit about our training and our prep and about the Camino, but also then about our lives and our motivation. And it was really quite lovely. So when I got to the spot where I was planning to stay the night, Lenore says in another 3 or 4 kilometers is another albergue that she had checked out earlier that sounded good. It's early, it's the first day, I'm all full of it. And I say, sure, I'll go. And so I continued on with Lenore and arrived at this albergue in Vila Chá. Our host greeted us. He was gigging us at least a little bit. He said, "You have a reservation." And we were really tired and footsore at that time. And I said, do we need a reservation? He says, no, come on in. But Edgar was his name. He was full of wisdom, which I will share over the next months. But one thing Edgar did is he had a sign on the counter in the kitchen area of the albergue that said, Union Soup 7:30. And you signed up. And he says, it's Union Soup, not onion soup, just to make sure that, we didn't think that he was misspelling the word or something like that. And indeed, it was Union Soup. And so that evening, he cooked a very simple, completely vegan soup with just vegetables, and we could add a little olive oil or some pimento or something like that to spice it up a little bit. Very, very communal, very welcoming soup. We had 10 other people from Switzerland, Estonia, Italy, Greece, the Czech Republic, the U.S., and Portugal. And so, there was that sense of community right away. They say you will find your community on the Camino. And indeed I did. I told Edgar as we left the next morning that I could not have imagined a better introduction to life at an albergue. The second defining thing that happened in those first 2 days is it rained. And it rained and it rained, and it never stopped raining. It rained every day on the Camino. And it rained sideways. It was raining buckets. And so we're hiding underneath a little overhang at that point. I had told Lenore I would walk with her that day. We had breakfast together and we continued up the coast, walking mostly on cobblestones in urban areas. And I was checking my phone often because I had an app that would tell me where I was exactly on the Camino. A little blue dot would come in. Lenore and I became soulmates in that rain. Man, it was just dumping. And by mid-morning, I checked the little apple. Oh yeah, see, that's kind of what that looked like. So there's a long promenade of cobblestones for most of the way on those first couple of days. And mid-morning, I checked my phone, and the little apple icon was all that came up. And then it flashed off, and that was the last I saw of my phone. It was, yeah. We got the second day, so that second day, we got to where I was planning to go on that second day, which now is a shorter distance because the first day was longer. But at that point, with no phone, my feet were really hurting me, and I'm starting to think, Lenore pushed me a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And so I got off and said goodbye to Lenore and checked into the second albergue. There were times on the Camino when I felt very connected, and I wrote that those were not necessarily only when there were other people around. And there were other times when I felt very alone, and those were not necessarily times when there were no other people around. This was one of those alone times. The host at the second albergue, Connie, was very friendly, and I was early. It was only about 1 o'clock. I unpacked and showered off, went off to the grocery to buy Vaseline for my feet and a bag of rice for my phone, and I soon realized that, the bag of rice trick, this is going to take days, and I don't have days. I got an hour. And we tried the hairdryer. Nothing was working. I really did entertain the idea of making it to Santiago without a cell phone. People have been doing this for hundreds of years, and some of the guidebooks actually advocate try going without your technology and make that part of your pilgrimage. But I'm thinking about the end trip, about hotels and buses and airline tickets, and I'm also thinking about all those photos that I'd already taken. There they are, and mostly I have no way of contacting Mary, so there's no way of reaching back home. So after a couple hours, Connie says there's a little store a little further into town that sells cell phones. So I hobbled down in my Crocs, a little shop selling vacuum cleaners and radiator hoses, and he's got a glassed-in case with cell phones. No iPhones, but he's got a bunch of them. And I pointed to the cheapest one, got the SIM card changed over. So it was an Android phone, and it took some time, in fact, the whole time, trying to figure out Android after the Mac or after the iPhone. And it was a cheap phone. Every time I put it in my pocket, it would start singing all on its own. It would turn on and off. One day it turned off for an entire day, and I thought I'd killed another cell phone. And then it came back alive again. But it would turn off data roaming. It would turn on airplane mode, freaking me out the whole time. And but I was able to load in the app, and after some time was able to actually contact Mary. So got back on the road. So the way. So the first legs of the trip were along boardwalk. A lot of time on the boardwalk, which was a blessing on your feet, and it also looks really cool. It was right along the sea. There were paths through there, and through narrow city streets like this. And there were cobblestones, and more cobblestones. And some of them were really ornate. I mean, the big cities were filled with streets with these cobblestones that are beautiful. They're gorgeous. They're hard on your feet. Sometimes you were hiking on a road like this. Sometimes next to a highway. So this yellow streak right there, that's designated Camino. And this was a very stormy, windy day there. You can see that power line had broken off and had broken off that there. And I had to walk by that thing. It was a little dicey. But yeah, that's how the route goes. Sometimes the path took you down these nice little wooded paths, and sometimes the path got rough and rougher. One day, I hiked a path like this, not exactly this one, up and over a hill in the middle of a downpour, and this thing turned into a river. And so, there were some challenges there, but then it would take you along a little walkway like that, and then there were always roadside attractions. So, yeah, people put up places little things to see. There's a horse, various things. This thing, so FCP, when I was in Portugal, this was spray painted everywhere. I think, what is that? I came to decide this was freaking Crazy Pilgrim. But no, it's the Football Club of Porto. And then a lot of these. So along the way, people would pile up rocks and little mementos, photographs, memorabilia, all kinds of things like that. Make a little shrine. And there are lots of things all along the route. This is a big rock that somebody had painted up. And this is an Oreo. So once you get up into Spain, I won't use the pointer. But these are old grain storage structures. So they're everywhere. They're kind of a symbol of Galatia, sort of like windmills and the Netherlands. And some are really old, and then sometimes they will make little replicas of like this, like a little replica of a windmill, and put it in their front yard. But they're all on stilts, and they have those round things there to keep the mice out of the grain. And waterfalls and everywhere, just gorgeous scenery. So by the fourth day, I arrived in Ancora, a town called Ancora, very footsore. There was not a municipal albergue there. There was a hotel. And so I checked into the hotel, so it was the first time that I had a private room, and I tended to my feet. Eventually, I found some food, which was an apple, a sausage, and a bag of chips. And I thought I might lay over at that hotel because I had such a beautiful view of the the sea and needed to rest my feet. But then I counted the days, and I did not. As the longer I sat there, the more I felt like I had stepped off the Camino, and I didn't like that feeling. And so after waiting for, I got up the next morning and headed out again. We crossed into Spain on a water taxi just as a storm blew in. This is when I had to do the hiking on that rough terrain. This woman and her husband, Ed and Lisa, crossed the river with me, and we made that big trek across the hill together, through the woods, through the rain. I said, boy, I bet this is a lot more fun when it's not raining. And then we emerged upon the city. We had lunch at a cafe. They were full of aphorisms: never pass by an open door, always appreciate a bad cup of coffee because it makes the others taste so much better, and o tempo de where is the phrase? O valor do tempo. So Portuguese, the value of time. Know the value of time. On the way to the albergue after lunch, a Spanish woman smoking a cigarette came up behind me and said, "Are you going to the albergue?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Let me show you." And she took me down these narrow little routes. And my phone is telling me, "No, we're not really going there." And she says, "Spain's really a friendly place. There are some people you have to watch out for." And just about the time that I'm thinking she might be one of them, we emerged at the albergue, and so it was all good. Phew. So, albergues. This is where I stayed. These are hostel-like inns. Some of them are municipal, some of them are private. I found they were all very clean, very welcoming, very accommodating. This is one of the most simple setups that you would find, a bunk like that, and there were about 24, I think, bunks in this room, and out the other door was a kitchen area and a common area, and then places to shower and to do your laundry and that sort of thing. This is the albergues don't open up until about 2 in the afternoon. They cost anywhere from about, the lowest I paid was €8, which is roughly $8, and the most I paid was €20, so $20 for an albergue. And this is us, we're waiting outside an albergue in the rain for it to open up. Some of them, so this one was in an old home. This is a third-generation farmstead, and so the man and his son who run this albergue, who had remodeled it, it was his grandfather's farm at one point, and these pillars were grapevines, and so very quaint and very nice. And some of them are very shishi. So this was one in a city with this little cubicle, the lights in there, there was a bank of lights in there. You could control the inside of your cubicle. You could control the light immediately. Outside your cubicle, you could control the lights in the whole darn place. And so anyway, there were various setups. This is kind of the stink chamber. They all had laundries. This is the fanciest laundry I found. Most had more rudimentary things. And there's always a place to put your shoes. The weirdest albergue was in a town called Arameyosa. I had arrived with a couple that I had been hiking with that day, and they had gone off to another spot, a hotel that they had booked. And the guy checked me in. It was a very old, institutional kind of a building, kind of like, I felt like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Little rooms with a single cot and a sink, and then a communal shower down the hall. And there were probably 4 floors of this with 30 rooms on a floor. I got in, I showered, I was early in the day, went down to find some food, and when I finally came back, there was no one there. It was in this big, spooky building all night long. But all's well. So, food. I had the idea that that I would be hiking from little fishing village to little fishing village to little fishing village, eating seafood till it came out my ears. And I love seafood, so I was really looking forward to this kind of culinary trip up the coast. Did not happen. I did find some really very good meals of sole and some sea bream and I believe this is eel, which was fantastic, and one really great hamburger. But food was sometimes a challenge. Restaurants close at 2 o'clock, and they don't open up again until 7:30 or 8. And with my schedule, I would be pulling into the albergue right about the time when the restaurants closed. So then you're kind of toast for a long time. One day, breakfast was a bag of peanuts. One night, dinner was a can of tuna and a chocolate croissant from the vending machine at the albergue. And then bar food. So this night was a hot dog. Lenore had some fish cakes. That guy's from France, I think. And here's Lenore and I at breakfast. Lots of pastries all throughout the whole thing. Big thing in Portugal is a thing called a francesinha, which is awful. It's just 2 slices of bread with some pork and some sausage, like salami type sausage or that sort of thing, fried, and then covered with cheese and doused with this kind of tomato beer sauce with an egg on top. It's total gut bomb. And I think I ate 2 of those before I decided no more. And then, despite that, you'd be walking along and there would be a bag of cherry tomatoes that somebody had left on a ledge for pilgrims. So, there it would be. Or a Spanish omelet right at the right time. And then there was like this food stand that just popped up out of nowhere. This thing was amazing. There was a cord running down from a little village on the other side of the wall there. Nobody was staffing this at all. There was music playing. There was a coffee machine set up. There was beer in the cooler. There was fresh fruit. There were cookies and crackers and all kinds of snack foods and a jar out there that said, whatever you can, and a little wayside rest that somebody had set up there. These are my friends from Spain when we came upon that. And then there were these 2 women. One day when I was walking along thinking, gee, I could sure use a cup of coffee right around the corner. The Camino will provide. There was lots of pastry. Lots of pastry in Portugal and in Spain. Pastéis de nata, a custard tart, which is sort of famous in Portugal. I've made a couple batches of this since I've been back. They're fantastic. Once I got into Spain, more empanadas and fresh bread. But I learned to shop ahead. So when I could, I would stop at a little grocery store and I would have some lunch. In Aramiosa, the place with the weird albergue, I had showered, I went downtown to find some food. My phone, it was 2:30. I knew I was running a risk, but my phone was telling me there was a restaurant that was open. Got down to it. Indeed, it was open. I walked in the door and the guy greeted me at the door and he said, "Kitchen is closed." And I must have looked famished or something. And so he said, wait, and he took me over to the manager or someone, the woman running the bar, whatever. And she says, well, I can do some empanadas and some cheese for you. I said, sure. And so for a couple of euros, I had some food. That was great. The place kind of cleared out, and there was... The staff then came out. They were kind of getting ready for the next wave or something. And they all had these racks of ribs. And I was really trying not to salivate. But the woman came over after a little while and brought me some ribs as well. So, people do take care of you. And the people. So yes, this is, as I said at the beginning, the people are what people say the Camino is all about, and it's really true. This is not my revelation. They are all over, and you will find your community. It started with those 2 Spanish guys Here they are on the beach. This is a man. It's a man and his son, and they were hiking together. Had a great rapport, even though we really couldn't communicate. We kept leapfrogging each other up the road. Then there was Lenore, and then along the way another Spanish guy, Juan. We all cooked dinner together one night at an albergue when everything was closed in town. It was not quite like the first meal, but close and good. And then I met these women, Fiona and Pam from Victoria, and again, leapfrogged them up and down the coast. And one day I hiked with them the entire day. This was that day that the phone decided to freak me out and die for a period of time. So I stuck close to Fiona and Pam so I would have some kind of communication.
South Africa or Australia?
Oh, I'm sorry, British Columbia, Victoria, from Canada. Thank you. I ran into them along the route. We got into a conversation. They said they had a nice dinner the night before at an albergue with a woman from Colorado. And I said, "Oh, Lenore." And she said, "Oh, you must be David." So it was locally famous. You know, Fidelis and Maxwell from Surprise, Arizona, who would, surprise, show up. Martin from Australia, Ed and Lisa from Canada, Trevor and Rory from England, Nicole, a therapist from Germany who really helped me at the right time, Jen, who helped me understand Android, all of the albergue hosts. And I would say that the experience was positive all over. So there was no negativity. So there's Martin. Here is the youngest hiker that we found on the Camino, or that I found, 2 years old, and they're hiking the whole route. This is a crossing guard, not her husband, but her husband was with her. And then just, I took random pictures of people. There's a man going to school, and a couple guys along the wharf, and these two guys fixing a boat on a very rainy day along the coast, and these women hiding from the rain for a little while. And I think of this person as Eleanor Rigby. She was taking care of the vestments and the stuff in the church as I went by. This guy, so at one stop close to the end, there were thermal baths, and I was encouraged to go down and soak your feet. In the bath was an 80-year-old guy in nothing but a Speedo, fully immersed. And after a few minutes of soaking my own feet, I said, "Foto, por favor." And he says, €50. No, thanks. But this guy didn't mind having his picture taken at all. This guy was sorting barnacles. So barnacles in Portugal are a delicacy. You actually eat these somehow. And bacalhau, so in Portugal, this dried and salted cod is a big deal. Here's a guy in a market selling bacalhau. And I was really, I was just taken with the markets and the fish markets and how this all was. I came to think of the route markers as breadcrumbs. Often they were very well marked, like this one, can't miss that. Sometimes they were just spray painted yellow arrows on the side of a pole or a brick wall or something like that. The routes are very well marked. There are times when you'd get turned around or a little bit, or you'd miss a mark or something. Once someone, a couple times actually, people would say, "Are you on the Camino? Are you a peregrino?" And I'd say, "Sí," and they'd say, "Back that way." And so they'd straighten me around. So, minor lost, but they're very well marked. So like this. Toward the end, especially with my phone troubles, I got less and less dependent on my phone app and just started following the breadcrumbs, getting to where I needed to go. Just a little bit of, stuff going on in Portugal, north of Marinhas. There was this big agricultural area, really right up against the sea. They fertilize with seaweed and grow vegetable crops and all kinds of things in hoop houses. It was warm there, and the oranges were still in season. This was eucalyptus trees being harvested. It was very aromatic. It was very nice walking through the eucalyptus forests, and they were harvesting that time. This was fairly common, somebody out in a yard along in a, raking, doing some gardening, something like that. And then as I got into Galatia, I got into grape country, and the aroma of the grapes was just fantastic. Here, the Camino actually took you down a row of grapes. That was rare, but it was very nice. Here, so this is Vigo, a major city along the route, and you can't, it's a terrible picture, but you can see up in the bay, this is a long bay that goes out to the sea, and there are those dots out there. Those dots are big square platforms. I'm going to guess, and I was a long ways away, but guess as at least as large as this room. And there are hundreds of them all lined up in rows marching out to the seas. And what are those things? Those are mussel farms. So on each of those farms are ropes that go down into the water. And so, in all likelihood, when you are eating mussels at a restaurant, this is where they come from. These are more of the barnacles. And, again, I fell in love with the fish shops. If only I could have, taken one of these things home and cooked it. But, dealing with a fish in an albergue was not going to really work out so well. The last 4 days of the hike, the nature of the thing kind of changed for me. It became more purposeful. Up to that time, I had mapped out my way and more or less was sticking to it. But the feeling was like, I'll see how far I get. I had planned to go about 14, 15 miles a day. And indeed, that's what I ended up doing. I found that 20 kilometers, about that same distance, is what I could handle. It would take me about 5 hours to do that. And I had, that was my plan, kind of optimistically thinking I can beat that, but then no, that's just what it turned out to be. And it took 14 days to make the whole trip. Toward the end, though, here I was really planning ahead, and I would call ahead to the albergues to make sure that there was room when I got there. In Pontevedra, a fairly major city, there was a shopping district. I went out at about 7:30 at night. This is blocks long. It's like the size of the Milwaukee downtown, jammed with people. And they're all out of all ages. They're out at the sidewalk cafes. They're in the shops. There's furniture stores, clothing stores, everything you can imagine. This would be the envy of any downtown in America, to have people out doing things at that time of the night. And it was just the thing to do. You came out with your kid in a stroller, and you came out if you were, 80. It was great. In Caldas de Rez were the thermal baths, and in Padrón, I pulled in, and that night I spent 2.5 hours on the phone outside the albergue in the rain, talking to Delta, which had canceled my flight. The last day to Santiago, from Padrón up to Santiago, I was up early, kind of restless that night. I was getting to like hiking in the dark, so that in Spain, sunrise was not until 9 in the morning, because of the way the meridians work and because of the really funky way that Spain doesn't do daylight savings time. And so, it was, and the albergues want you out by 8. So, and I'm early anyway, so I would get out by 7:30 or 8, and it would be dark. And I kind of got used to doing that. I kind of liked it. You have to be alert. So, on Sunday I talked about, being present in the moment, and that's definitely true at that time. So that day I had coffee at a little town called Escravitude, and then twice more, and I had a really nice salmon dinner at the high point of the hike at Milla de Oro. Then it looked like it was going to be an easy 7 kilometers down into Santiago. It was not quite that easy. Once I got into Santiago itself, which is a fairly major city, the breadcrumbs disappeared. I don't know what happens. And there are no route markers, no signs. I was using my phone and trying to figure out where the heck I was. But it took a while to get down to the city and at the very end through this gauntlet of vendors hawking things and, running out, trying to sell you timeshares and all kinds of things, and just entering the cathedral courtyard through this gauntlet. And I'm thinking, Jesus and the money changers. And really. And then so here's the last route marker. You can see 5 kilometers to go. Oh, yes. And then you emerge at this big square out in the cathedral. And here are my 2 friends from Spain, the 2 guys that I had met on the first day. I had not seen them at this point for 4 or 5 days, and there they were. And it's a big party scene outside, and the cathedral itself is open to tourists. You do have to book a tour into the cathedral. So lots of folks like me who have hiked the cathedral, okay, I'm here. I'm not going in. Because I would have had to, schedule the thing, come back another day and go, see the remains of St. James. And no, I'm done. And, this is what it's like. So we're crashed and hanging out here on the cobbles. So that was, hey.
Coming to see everything.
Great. I was able to find my way to the credentialing office, and I received my Compostela and also a certificate of mileage. So this was quite moving, and I got these framed. I didn't think so, but there's that little card down there with all the stamps on it. And along the way, wherever you stop at restaurants or at albergues or something, you get a stamp. They have their own individual stamp, and that tells the people at the end that you have walked the whole way. And then when you have done that, then you present that at the credentialing office, and it's quite official. You sign in, you take a number. I think that in the high season, when there are people coming in from all of those routes, it gets quite busy. But it's like there are windows set up like a bus station with people behind them then who certify where you started your whole way. They look at all your stamps and make sure you have made it, and then they give you the certificate, handwritten in Latin. So it was quite cool. That night, I made it to an albergue in Santiago, washed my clothes, brought groceries for the next day, had some tapas, and then I went out for more dinner to a great little hole in the wall and got back really satisfied. So I did see a lot of churches. And some of these are from the time when Mary and I were together. And, the insides of these are just more ornate and more ornate and more ornate. And hand-carved. I mean, these date back to the 1100s in some cases. And it's amazing to me how all the cherubs look exactly like Ted Kennedy. Sometimes they were simple. So here's a little church along the route, very nice and plain inside. Sometimes they were very pleasant. Sometimes not so pleasant. And so this is actually 2 photos of the same glassed-in case, and I'm sorry for the reflection. It's very hard to see, but this is Jesus on a horse, smiting down the Moors. So, yeah. And, you may be wondering, so he's done this long Camino, went there for, rest and rejuvenation. Has he found God? Yes, I did. Here he is. So this is God from the 17th century, and he is holding the whole world in his hands right there. I'll go back a slide. We did visit a catacomb at one point through there. and always there was the sea. So, wow. How did I do, Mary? That was pretty good. You gave me 20 minutes. I took 15. No, I took 45. One more thing, one last story. The day after finishing, I was in Santiago. As I said, I'd washed my clothes and prepped and got ready to leave. And I was to take a bus from Santiago back to Porto and then would be flying out. It was Sunday morning when I finished, and I was flying out on Tuesday. I was having breakfast that morning upstairs. I had a roll and a piece of fruit, I think, and got ready to leave, picked up my backpack and checked the pocket, and my wallet was stolen. Gone at that point, and later discovered to be absolutely gone. My passport, my credit cards, my cash, my immunization records, everything. And so I spent many hours, 3 hours of real dark despair. And other people in the albergue were helping. A woman gave me 50 euros, and we tried calling around, called to the local police, who said, call back tomorrow, it's Sunday, can't help you today. And came to understand that I would have to make a report with the national police, and then the next day, Monday, contact the embassy and take it from there. So waited for the albergue person to come in. She got there about 10:30 in the morning. I asked, can I stay there that night? I got no money, I got nothing, but I'm going to need a place to stay. She said yes. So I stashed my pack in a locker, hiked across town back to the national police. I walked in and asked, I told them I need to report a stolen wallet. They said, what's your name? Told him, what's your name again? Told him. Guy walked into a back room, came back out with another guy with my wallet. The whole thing was there, minus one credit card and all the cash. So we're going to talk about this more on Sunday. The nature of miracles, and you know, we're going to dive into that a little bit more. Extremely lucky, you know. I had called Mary and had her cancel the credit card. So even once I got everything back, I still had no money. But I did have a passport, and I had a bus ticket and all that. So, and I called my friends Fiona and Pam, who you saw earlier on, just because I needed some support. And they said they're still about a day out, but they were getting ready, and they were like two moms on the way to rescue Dave. And so, you know, that network of people is just amazing. So I made it. Yeah. Questions?
Where was the local embassy?
Well, I think Madrid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have had to make my way across Spain at some point. And how, I don't know, you know, don't know. But we managed through cell phones and credit cards and airplane tickets and passports. Bathrooms! So I'm a guy. There are not that many public restrooms. Pam and Fiona pointed this out, and you know, it is more difficult in that regard. But albergues, restaurants, you know, where you can.
Where the trees mark
Where you can.
Isn't hers?
Yeah, it's, you know, so the many times you are alone for long stretches. There was a day that I really wanted to hike. There was an alternate route that would take me inland just a little bit or right along the coast. It was supposed to be a very rainy, stormy day, and most people were opting for inland, but I said, no, I'm here for the sea. And so I did hike that coastal route and didn't see anybody until well after noon. But usually there's people. Really along the route, wherever you go. Yeah?
Of the different routes, why did you happen to pick this one? Was it because of the sea?
Good question. Yeah, I thought the ocean the distances seemed right. And in researching, where we would go, I mean, Spain would have been very nice to visit as well. We could have started in Madrid and done that. But yeah, no, the sea. I think the ocean. Yeah.
If you were going to compare it to part of the United States, what was it like?
Oh, many of the people that I met were really reminded of the California coast. The succulents and the rocky shore and how that all was. Pam and Fiona, for example, said this really reminds them of that California coast. Yeah, I think about a lot like that, and steep, lots of up and down. I said that I came back feeling like I'm not young, but I'm not as old as I was afraid I might be. My feet were killing me, but everybody's feet were killing them. And otherwise, hips, knees, ankles, quadriceps, everything was fine. It was good. It was good hiking that way. Yep. Yeah, Ellen.
Have you stayed in touch with the people that you exchanged?
Not since. So almost. Like in the week after, I think I've been in contact with Lenore. I haven't contacted Pam and Fiona yet, but I plan to. I will. Yep.
Because no comparison to the adventure you had. Jeff and I used to stay in B&Bs years ago.
Yeah.
And we would stay in contact with people for some
Yeah.
years. Just like
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm feeling very close. Yeah. Yeah, Jeff.
Most interesting location for you and why?
Oh wow. So on the pre-trip, we were in Lisbon, Coimbra, and Porto, and all of them are great. I have to say that I liked Coimbra best. It's where that university was, and there was an ancient library there and an old organ, and it was nice. Though, boy, it's a toss-up. On the Camino itself, I can't pick. Sorry. Yeah. Good. Yeah, Debbie.
How heavy was your pack?
Good question. Ended up being about 18 pounds. When I started and when I first packed my pack at home, I was down to about 12. But I added a big thick journal. I had an extra guidebook, which I ditched partway through the trip. And then when I packed it at first, everything was absolutely dry, which never happened on the Camino. Everything was soaked. But I wore exactly what I'm wearing right now. And I had exactly this as a second change of clothes, except for the sweater. So shirt, pants, and 3 pairs of socks, 3 pairs of shorts. This sweater, my rain gear, pair of silk long johns, and my Crocs. And that was it. Yeah. Yeah, Maria.
I know when we had gone overseas, we had seen people who had done a public pilgrimage and were walking across the plaza in front of the church on their knees. Did you see anybody
No, I saw no one walking on their knees. Really a good question. At times, I felt like it. Yeah, I know. Like I said at the beginning, I think motivation, in talking with people. So why are you doing this? You know, and most everybody has some sort of renewal going on. Call that spiritual or, you know, mental, physical, whatever it is, whatever it is. But there is a lot of there are a lot of people who are hiking for the physical part of it, you know, like you might hike the Appalachian Trail here or the Ice Age Trail or something like that. Yeah, yeah. Michael.
Were there people hiking in both directions?
Yes. So the honest answer to that is yes. Everything ends at Santiago, but there are some people who do that Francais, get to Santiago, and then continue down toward Lisbon. And so there are blue arrows, I think, that take you down to Lisbon, and there were people doing that. There also were people biking. There are routes, ways to take the Camino by bicycle, and so I came across mountain bikers and others on the path. In order to receive your Compostela, you need to have walked at least the last 100 kilometers of the route, or have biked the last 200 kilometers of the route. Jeff?
But you fully physically recovered it.
No. I told Christine, I lost a legitimate 10 pounds on the route, and I gained nearly all of it back over Thanksgiving. and I'm not, I need to walk more. And I just have not kept up with it. I mean, I have walked, but not 15 miles a day. No. Yeah. Fado, yes. There was great music at many locations along the route. We enjoyed music up on top of a hotel one night in Porto, and so fado is the characteristic music of Portugal. It's guitar based and very bluesy, songs of the sea, and so yeah, we heard some fado. I'm trying to think along the route itself. Not so much other than that, unless you were to seek it out at the evenings. Yeah. Chet.
People walk in singing sometimes, sing money walking.
Oh yeah, there was a guy. There was one guy at an albergue who was he was gorgeous. He had a beautiful voice, and he's just singing. I had to tell him, "Man, you're making my day. Your voice is so beautiful." And he says, "Yeah, he sings while he walks." So yeah.
And one more thing, you ever stay up the cards, play games, hang out?
Nobody played games. No, that's a good question. But no, I don't recall any kind of a card game like that. Good conversation. And, again, it's the lonely, connected thing. So there were some times at the albergue where, I'm surrounded with people and I'm just feeling trashed. And always, whenever I would get into a conversation with somebody, that's when, I'd feel reconnected again. So the conversations were always available. No games. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Critters, animals?
Interesting. So Christine and Donald were asking about birds, and bird life was scarce. I saw seagulls and a few shorebirds, wading birds, egret type birds, and no. I'm trying to think of squirrels and anything like that. I can't. Yeah. Good question, though. Yeah. I've seen coyotes since coming back.
So humans are the only animal life.
People probably scared them all up.
Yeah, I mean, you're hiking from little town to little town to little town. So, there were, as you saw, times when you're in the woods. But it's fairly populated all the way. Yep. Yeah.
Your stolen wallet, passport. Is there other crime you've heard about along the way?
So some of the guidebooks and some of the advice going in says, be careful. The wallet I had was one of those travel wallets with a lot of compartments in it that would hang around my neck. On that particular day, I had stuffed it in the top of my pack. It didn't work well with the compression strap on my pack and the waist strap and all that. So most of the time it was in this pocket in my rain jacket, like right next to me all the time. On this part, it was not. Again, my experience of the Camino was that the sense of community was great, and I did not feel threatened physically. In fact, they will tell you that violent crime is scarce, does not happen on the Camino or even in Portugal. But obviously, I got ripped off. Mm-hmm. More. Jeff.
What's next?
What's next? Well, I'm going to settle into work for a little while. Is that okay? I need to get back to some exercise routine here quick. And who knows, who knows? I did, as I said on Sunday, walking has become my main focus for spiritual practice. And so every day somewhere, not all days are as long as others, but someplace.
Maine to Georgia?
Who knows? Who knows? Yeah. Yeah, Maria.
You had a lot of rain. Was there any severe weather being so close to the ocean? Or what do they do when they have very severe weather?
Yeah, right. So you saw the power pole that was blown over. I mean, the whole time I'm thinking. So Alex Romashko in the service before I left offered the Irish blessing, "May the wind always be at your back." Damn, it worked. Like the way the weather patterns work in Portugal, the weather swirls and goes swooping right up the coast from the south. And so even, in 40-mile-an-hour winds, I'm just sailing along. So wind gusts of 40, 50 miles an hour was as serious as it got for me. And the sideways rain, man, it really rained a lot. I guess you'd just stop and hang out, I had dreams of being on the sea in a big gale, and then I'd get up and I'd walk through that same gale.
And what was on the sea?
So in this church I can say so. So I might use this sometime down the road on you. But, after a big storm like that, I'd look out and there would be a rainbow out over the ocean, the sign of God's promise to never visit upon the earth another deluge. And I think, my phone just died. Sorry. Chat.
Did you wake up any morning and kind of say to yourself, "Oh my God, that was the most nice dream, a very unique dream"?
Yes, and I'm not going to tell you about it. I did tell my friend Nicole from Germany, and she said, "I'm praying for you." Okay. Really good question. I will say that I feel better. Thank you. This has been rejuvenating, and I have not slept well for a number of years. I get up regularly, and that did not change. I did find myself getting up or waking up in the middle of the night on the Camino. And sometimes that's because I would go to bed at 8:30 and then sleep for 12 hours. But I did remember getting up once in the middle of the night, thinking, I had this great sense of well-being. So awake, but not fretting, just awake and thinking, this is great. This is really good. Mhm. Storms. I did have a storm dream, and then woke up in the storm. We're about at 7:30. I'll be hanging around if you want to ask any more questions, but you probably all have evenings to get back to and all that as well. Once again, thank you so much. This was a fabulous time. So,